Hi, I'm Rowena. My sister left her phone on the kitchen table. That's all it took, 10 minutes alone with the truth. It lit up, and there he was, my dead husband, his photo, his name. 7 years gone, a closed casket, 2 kids asking why Daddy never came back. And then, one message. I opened it, and what I read shattered everything I believed about my family, my marriage, even his death. They didn't just lie to me, they buried him twice. Now I'm digging him up, one secret at a time. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from, and what would you do if the dead called you back? The evening had that soft, gray light that makes everything look half-finished. The kind of light that sneaks through blinds and makes dust float like memories you didn't ask for. I was sitting at the kitchen table, folding the last of the twins' laundry. The clock on the wall ticked the same lazy rhythm Silas once fixed years ago. He'd said, "A house without sound feels like a coffin." Now it just felt like proof he wasn't here anymore. The twins had left with Seraphine an hour ago. She'd swept in like she always did, smelling of lavender and certainty, dropping opinions like breadcrumbs. "You really should let go of the past, Ro," she'd said, before heading out. That was her version of love. Efficient, distant, final. I was halfway through pairing socks when a phone buzzed on the table. Not mine, hers. She must have left it behind. The name on the screen made my chest lock tight. Silas Vale. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The ringtone, the one he used to have, echoed through the small kitchen. I knew that tone. A custom sound I made for him years ago. Hearing it again after 7 years was like being yanked backward through time. I stared at the screen. The photo that flashed with the name was one I'd taken. The one where he'd squinted at the camera, smiling with that look that said he was both amused and tired of me taking pictures. My hand hovered, shaking. It rang again. I didn't want to answer, but the silence between rings was worse. I touched the screen. Nothing. A soft crackle, then static. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, whispering, "Hello?" Static turned to a low hum, like someone breathing through water. Then the line went dead. I held the phone there a while longer, my heart beating too loudly for such a quiet house. The screen lit up again. A text message this time. "See you Thursday." My throat dried. Thursday? It was Tuesday night. I read it again, then again, my eyes tracing each word as if meaning might shift if I looked long enough. I whispered, "Who are you?" to a piece of glass that couldn't answer. I called Seraphine. She picked up on the second ring, her voice steady and clipped, the way she talked when she'd already decided she was right. "Don't start this again, Rowena," she sighed. "You've been seeing ghosts since the funeral." Her words hit harder than I expected. "It was your phone, Sarah. It rang. His name was—" "Stop," she cut in. "You're doing it again. You need rest." "I'm not imagining it." "Good night, Rowena." Click. Just like that, the line went dead again. I sat there staring at the phone, her screen still glowing faintly, reflecting my face, drawn, pale, older than I remembered. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where my husband's name had just been. I wanted to cry, but something colder pressed down on me instead. Confusion first, then dread. The last time I'd heard that ringtone was the night Silas died. The memory pulled itself forward, sharp as glass. The storm had rolled in fast that night, wind slamming against the windows. He'd called me, saying he'd be late coming home from a client meeting. Then, just before 9, the ringtone. I'd answered, static, nothing else. They said the car hit the barrier near the lake minutes later. Debt notices arrived within weeks. Condolences came and went. Seraphine had been the practical one. "You have twins to raise. You can't afford to fall apart." I had wanted to scream, but all I'd managed was a nod. Now, 7 years later, that same sound dragged everything back. The grief, the exhaustion, the endless sense of being left to clean up a life that wasn't finished when it ended. The house felt too still. I pushed the chair back and climbed the stairs to the attic. The light switch clicked, but the bulb flickered once before holding steady. The air smelled of cardboard and dust. In the far corner sat a wooden box with Silas's name scrawled in my handwriting. I'd promised myself I'd never open it again. But my hand moved before my mind could stop it. Inside were the small remains of a man's existence. Unpaid bills, a broken watch, a photo of us. Him with his arm around me, both of us smiling as if we didn't already know how temporary happiness could be. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped. A message from Seraphine. Forget what you saw. The attic light flickered once, then steadied again. I looked at the message until the letters blurred. She knew. She'd known before I even called her. My pulse thudded in my ears. Whatever this was, it wasn't grief or delusion. I whispered, "The dead don't text." Then softer, more to myself, "But someone living does." The clock downstairs ticked on, the same rhythm Silas had set, the same silence he left behind. That night, I didn't sleep. The ticking clock downstairs was no longer just a sound, it was a reminder. Every creak in the hallway, every gust of wind outside felt like something was watching, waiting. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, Silas's name still burning behind my eyelids. The message, the ringtone. And Seraphine's text, "Forget what you saw." When the sun finally crept through the curtains, I got up, not because I felt rested, but because I couldn't stand another minute lying still. Seraphine's phone was still on the kitchen table. She hadn't even realized she left it, or maybe she had, and just didn't care. I poured myself some coffee, sat down, and stared at the screen. Curiosity and fear tangled inside me. I opened her messages. Most of it was what you'd expect. Church groups, board reminders, charity drives, her Bible study circle. But one thread caught my eye, a name I didn't recognize, Delphine Cross. I tapped it open. There weren't many messages, but they weren't casual either. One stood out at the bottom. "Transfer done. She still suspects nothing." My stomach dropped. Who's she? Me? I stared at the words, cold crawling up my spine. Seraphine always acted like she knew better, like she was just trying to help me survive. But this wasn't help. This was betrayal. I looked at the clock, 8:03 a.m. I had to return the phone. I also needed answers. By 9 so, I was downtown, pulling into the underground garage of her law firm. Her office building always made me feel like I didn't belong. Glass, stone, white marble floors you could see your reflection in, and receptionists who looked like they judged your shoes. I walked through the lobby, rehearsing what I'd say. Nothing dramatic, just return the phone, see what I could pick up. I took the elevator up to the 11th floor, where everything smelled like orchids and expensive ink. Seraphine greeted me with that same smile she wore at funerals. Polite, sharp, hollow. "You didn't have to bring it in," she said, taking the phone from my hand. "I would have picked it up." "I figured you'd need it first thing," I said. Her eyes searched mine, a flicker of suspicion. "You shouldn't go through other people's things, Rowena," she said, voice low. "It's unhealthy." Unhealthy. That was her word for everything she didn't want to deal with. Grief, unhealthy. Curiosity, unhealthy. Questioning her version of the truth? Downright pathological. She gestured for me to sit, but didn't offer coffee. She was always good at subtle punishment. "I know it's hard," she started, "but Silas's insurance closed years ago. You need to let this go, for the twins, for yourself." I nodded slowly, pretending to agree, pretending to move on. She stepped out to take a call. And that's when I saw it. A file folder on her desk, slightly ajar. Cross Insurance Holdings. Settlement date, last week. My heart pounded in my ears. I leaned closer, just enough to see the top page. There it was. A policy number, Silas's name, his digital signature. I didn't dare take a picture. Instead, I repeated the number in my head until it tattooed itself onto my memory. He'd been dead 7 years. How could he sign anything last week? I left before she returned, muttering something about an appointment. I didn't want to give her a reason to look too closely at me. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. I stood in the parking garage, keys in hand, trying to understand what I'd just seen. She knew. Seraphine knew something. I waited near her car. When she finally came down, she looked surprised to see me. "I need to ask you something," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Here?" "You knew about another insurance policy, didn't you?" Her face didn't change, but her shoulders stiffened. "You knew. You knew there was more. Why didn't you tell me?" She stepped closer, her tone calm, even kind, on the surface. "Not everything belongs to you, Rowena. Silas was complicated. Let sleeping ghosts rest." That hit me like a slap. Not everything belongs to you. I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Laundry, errands, pretending for the kids. But my mind kept circling back. The message, the policy, the lie in my sister's voice. That night, I was cleaning up dinner when the phone rang again. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but it left a message, a woman's voice, whispering, "Stop asking questions, or you'll wish he stayed dead." I stood there, the phone pressed against my ear, the chill in my chest tightening. I replayed the message, twice, then again. Her voice was calm, cold, familiar in a way I couldn't place. I sat at the kitchen table, scribbling the policy number on a notepad, my hand shaking. I stared at it. A string of numbers. A breadcrumb trail left behind by a ghost, or someone pretending to be one. "You can threaten me all you want," I whispered. "I've already lost everything." Then I picked up my own phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Mary Jo, an old friend from the state records office. She picked up on the second ring. "Rowena," she said. "Wow, I need your help," I said. "I need to find out who filed an insurance claim, and when." There was a pause. "Are you in trouble?" I didn't answer that. Not yet. "Just check something for me, please." She promised to call me back in the morning. I ended the call and sat in the dim kitchen, staring at the notepad. The number looked ordinary, harmless, but I knew it wasn't, because whoever had signed that settlement wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I barely remember the drive to Springfield that morning. The highway stretched endless and gray beneath a sky the color of old bruises. The coffee in my cup holder went cold long before I reached the Illinois State Records office. I must have checked the rearview mirror a dozen times, half expecting to see that same dark car from the night before still trailing me. By the time I pulled into the visitor lot, my hands were trembling, not from fear exactly, but from whatever sits between dread and determination. I sat there a moment, staring at the building. It wasn't intimidating, just plain concrete and glass. Still, I felt like walking inside meant crossing a line I couldn't step back over. Inside, the air smelled faintly of toner and cleaning solution. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Then I saw her, Helen Drake, the woman who used to live 2 doors down from me when the twins were toddlers. Her hair had gone grayer, but she still had that nervous energy, like she was always listening for something she shouldn't hear. "Rowena Vale," she whispered when she saw me. "It's been forever." "Too long," I said. "Thanks for calling me back." Helen glanced around before motioning me toward a small side room lined with filing cabinets. You didn't hear this from me, she said, closing the door halfway. But that policy number you asked about? It was reactivated last year. And there's a new beneficiary listed. My pulse quickened. Who? She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The monitor cast a bluish glow on her face. Finally, she sighed and whispered, Seraphine Vale. The room seemed to tilt sideways. My ears rang, and for a second I thought I might be sick. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. You're sure? Helen nodded. It's all here in the system. The claim was processed through Cross Insurance Holdings. Funny thing is, it shouldn't exist. The file's been marked private access only. Can you print it? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. She hesitated again. Rowena, if anyone finds out, I just need proof. A minute later, the printer whirred quietly. Helen slid the paper toward me, eyes flicking nervously toward the hallway. This shouldn't exist, she said again. The signature's digital, but it matches Silas's handwriting perfectly. Timestamp says 18 months ago. I looked down at the page. My breath caught. There it was, his name, Silas Vale. The S curved exactly the way he used to write it, with a small flourish at the top. I'd taught him that when we were dating, back when he signed birthday cards with block letters. My vision blurred. Someone had forged his signature perfectly. And whoever did it knew him intimately. His handwriting, his digital ID, everything. I didn't have to think hard to know who had both the access and the nerve. Seraphine. She'd handled all of our finances after he's died. To take the burden off, she'd said. I'd trusted her. I folded the paper, slid it into my purse, and thanked Helen. You've done enough, I told her. I'll take it from here. She gripped my arm before I left. Be careful, Rowena. There are people who don't like their names being connected to this, especially Cross. The drive back home blurred into a loop of headlights and memory. Could Seraphine really do it? My own sister, the woman who held my hand at the funeral, who promised she'd protect the twins and me, was cashing in on a dead man's life? Her voice from years ago echoed in my mind. You'll always have me. Now it sounded like a curse. By the time I got home, the sun was dipping behind the houses. The twins were upstairs, their laughter muffled through the walls. I wanted to protect that sound, keep it untouched by all this rot. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the dining table, the paper still folded in my purse. But curiosity, it eats at you. It won't let you rest. I remembered Silas's old laptop in the attic. It had been sitting there untouched for years, gathering dust next to boxes of baby clothes and tax receipts. I fetched it, wiped the dust off, and plugged it in. The screen flickered weakly, the way old things do when they're not ready to wake up. Password. I tried the obvious ones. His birthday, the twins' names. Nothing. Then on the third try, our anniversary, it unlocked. His inbox loaded slowly, messages stretching back over a decade. I scrolled to the oldest, then paused when I saw one dated just 2 days before the accident. Subject, if anything happens to me. My hands shook as I opened it. If anything happens to me, trust no one but Rowena. The account isn't what it seems. There was an attachment. A blank PDF file, password protected. I tried Rowena, denied. I tried twins, denied. I tried Seraphine, accepted. The screen flickered and the file opened. It was a scanned contract between Silas Vale and Delphine Cross. The Cross Insurance Holdings logo stared back at me like a warning. My stomach twisted as I scrolled down. Near the bottom, next to Silas's name, was another set of initials, SV and SV Silas Vale, Seraphine Vale. I whispered it out loud, like saying it might make it less real. You signed with him after he was gone. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a low rumble that shook the windows. I printed the document and slipped it into a manila folder. Across the front, I wrote one word in black marker: truth. Then the phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number again. My throat tightened as I swiped the screen. A photo filled the display: my house. The view from the street. It had been taken minutes ago. The porch light was still on, the curtains half drawn. A message followed: stop digging. I froze, the phone still in my hand. Slowly, I turned toward the front window. Outside, rain streaked down the glass in uneven trails. A car sat at the curb, engine idling, headlights off. For a long moment, I just watched. Then I exhaled, low and steady. If they think fear will stop me, I murmured, they've never seen me angry. I pulled the blinds shut, locked the doors, and sat back down at the table. The contract lay beside me, still warm from the printer. Whatever was coming next, I wasn't running anymore. I hadn't even realized I'd fallen asleep on the couch until the sound of the wind creaking the front door pulled me upright. The room was dim, early dawn bleeding through the blinds. My body was stiff from the awkward position, and I sat there for a moment, disoriented. Then I noticed it. The front door wasn't closed, not wide open, just not shut. Like someone had pulled it almost shut and let it hang there, the lock disengaged. My breath caught. I stood slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward it. On the threshold, right in the center of the welcome mat, lay a brass key, small, smooth, old-fashioned, and I'd never seen it before. For a second, I just stared. My eyes darted up to the quiet street outside, but everything looked normal, too normal. A paperboy tossed the Tribune onto the neighbor's lawn. A jogger's sneakers hit the pavement 2 houses down. But someone had been here, inside, while I was asleep. I picked up the key, cold and oddly heavy. My fingers tingled as if they knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I called Seraphine. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. Then, on a hunch, I checked her social media. Her last post, 4 hours ago, was a picture of a wine glass beside a fire pit. The caption read, "Much-needed weekend detox. Our lake time." The location tag, Vale Lake Cabin. I hadn't seen that place in years, not since Silas's accident, and now she was there. I whispered to no one, "That's where he died." By late morning, I had the twins settled with our neighbor, Mrs. Klein, who owed me more than a few favors from school runs. I didn't tell her why I needed to leave, just that it was urgent and I'd be back before dark. The drive to the cabin took just under 2 hours, long stretches of highway giving way to winding forest roads. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the trees themselves remembered. My mind replayed Silas's funeral, how Seraphine had insisted on cremation, fast, no time for questions. "It's what he would have wanted," she'd said, but I never remembered him saying that. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered, like grief had once made it enormous. Paint peeled off the porch railings, the wind whistled through broken shingles. But some things were new: fresh curtains inside, clean white dishes stacked on a drying rack by the sink, pantry shelves stocked with brand-name snacks my sister would never eat herself. Someone had been living here. I moved carefully, room to room. The drawer in the hallway credenza still held the letters Silas and I used to write each other in the early days. But now there were new envelopes mixed in, addressed to S. Vale, postmarked just weeks ago. One letter in particular stopped me. Seraphine's handwriting. "Transfer successful. Keep her distracted." My throat tightened. What transfer? I was back on the road before the sun began its descent. The trees outside my windshield blurred together, and my fingers tightened around the steering wheel the closer I got to home. When I walked through the door, Tom was at the kitchen table, fiddling with a small toy boat he must have dug out from the garage. He looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong in the world. "Aunt Sarah said we could visit Grandpa next Thursday," he said casually. I froze. "Grandpa?" "Yeah," he shrugged. "She said he misses us." The words cut deeper than I expected. My son, my 13-year-old boy, thought he still had a grandfather. Someone was feeding him lies, and Seraphine was at the center of it. I tried calling her again. This time she picked up. "You're taking my children to the lake?" My voice cracked. Her tone was syrupy. "Don't dramatize everything, Rowena. You're tired, paranoid. Maybe it's time you talk to someone, like a therapist?" I could practically see her rolling her eyes through the phone. "You don't get to patronize me, Seraphine. Not after this. Not after everything." She sighed, that familiar, condescending hum she used when I'd caught her, but she wanted to make me feel foolish for it. "You never could let things go, Rowena. That's always been your problem." I ended the call before she could say another word. Later that night, after the boys went to bed, I sat down with my laptop and pulled up our joint bank account. I hadn't looked at it in detail in months. I usually handled only the basics. But something gnawed at me. There they were, monthly withdrawals labeled Family Maintenance, Confidential. I followed the trail. Every one of them went to an account under the name Cross Insurance Holdings. Delphine Cross, the woman who supposedly hadn't spoken to Silas since before his death. The woman whose name kept popping up in every dirty corner I turned over. I printed out the statements, each one a breadcrumb. Each one proof that someone was siphoning money under Silas's name and hiding it in plain sight. I whispered to the quiet, to myself, to him, "You've been living off his ghost." I stood up, went to the drawer, and pulled out the brass key. Whatever it unlocked, I needed to find out. I deleted every contact in my phone except the twins, took the printed statements, tucked them into the folder marked Truth, and packed an overnight bag. As the rain began to fall, I grabbed my coat, slipped the key into my pocket, and locked the door behind me. "If you built this lie in his name," I whispered, "I'll burn it down in mine." I stood in my driveway for a moment longer, the brass key clenched in one hand, the folder marked Truth tucked under the other arm. Rain gathered at the edge of my hood, then dripped steadily down my face, as if even the sky had decided I needed waking up. I didn't bother to change clothes. I didn't wait for sunrise. I tossed the folder into the passenger seat and drove. The engine sounded louder than usual in the stillness of early morning, like it too wanted to scream. The 2-lane road to the lake cut through miles of quiet farmland and skeletal trees. The kind of silence out here that presses on your eardrums and makes you think too loud. I passed familiar turns I hadn't taken in years. Each curve pulled me closer to a place I swore I'd never see again. The cabin was still there, just past the sycamores, half hidden in fog. The shutters had been repainted, white, not the dark green Silas liked. But the porch swing creaked the same tired tune when I stepped out of the car. I walked to the front door. The brass key slid in like it had never been gone. Inside, the scent of cedar mixed with something newer, vanilla, maybe lavender. Candles melted into the wood tray on the coffee table. A wine bottle sat between 2 glasses. One still had lipstick on the rim. On the table, like a forgotten offering, lay a man's wedding ring. My throat closed up. It wasn't just like Silas's ring, it was his. The tiny nick on the edge where he'd dropped it fixing the shed. The engraving on the inside, "Always RV." My knees weakened. Then came the sound, a boot against gravel. I turned slowly toward the window, heart racing. A figure moved toward the dock, tall, broad shoulders. His walk limped just enough to stir memories. It couldn't be. I stepped outside. The morning fog clung to the lake like a breath that wouldn't let go. The figure stood at the edge, back to me, looking out over the still water. "Silas?" I said, so quiet I wasn't sure I'd said it aloud. He turned. Not Silas. Delphine Cross. A phone to his ear, calm as anything. Yes, she's here. No, she won't find out. Seraphine made sure of that. Made sure of what? My voice cracked louder now, and he startled, but only for a second. He ended the call and faced me. Mrs. Vale, you really shouldn't be here. It's not safe. I took a step forward. What is this place to you? He didn't answer. A folder sat on the bench behind him. A corner of a photograph peeked out. I saw the edge of a face, his, and next to him, unmistakably, Seraphine. I grabbed it. The photo was time-stamped. 1 year after Silas's funeral. This was taken here, I hissed. He was alive. Delphine didn't flinch. Alive. Yes, briefly. Some debts don't stay buried. He stepped around me, calm as you like, walked to a sleek black car I hadn't noticed parked behind the trees. As he opened the door, he said without turning, "You think you want the truth, but that's never been your gift, has it?" Then he was gone, tires hissing against the damp road, taillights vanishing into mist. My scream rose from somewhere deep, a place grief and rage had made into bone. I dropped to the ground. The photo fell, mud creeping up its edges. I wiped it clean with trembling fingers, smearing my own tears across the glossy surface. That photo didn't lie. And maybe Seraphine had never told the truth. I sat there a long while, long enough for the fog to thin, for birds to begin calling again like they hadn't watched the whole thing. Eventually, I went back inside. The bedroom looked untouched, but instinct pulled me to the old bed Silas built. I crouched, feeling along the wood slats beneath. My fingers brushed a catch, a soft click, a small drawer, inside a recorder. Plain black, dusty. I pressed play. Static. Then his voice. "If you're hearing this, it means Seraphine won. But you can still stop her. She'll never let go of what she built with my name." I didn't breathe. He paused. Then, "They used me. They're still using me. But you can end it, Ro." I pressed the recorder to my chest. A sob broke loose. Not from pain, but from clarity. He hadn't left. He'd been taken. I stepped out onto the dock. Wind off the water pulled at my coat, tangled my hair. I opened my fist and held the photo one last time. "You died for her greed," I said softly. "I'll make her live with her shame." Then I let it fall. The lake swallowed it without a ripple. From behind me, a sound. A soft click. I turned just in time to see a shadow disappear behind a tree. A camera. Someone had been watching. Again. The shadow vanished before I could even turn fully toward it. I stood on the damp wooden dock, rain misting around me, the lake swallowing the photo of Silas and Seraphine like it never existed. But it had. It did. And so did the lie I was standing inside. I drove back in silence, headlights cutting through patches of lingering fog. By the time I reached home, the twins were already up, quietly eating cereal at the kitchen island. Tom looked up first. "You were gone," he said, not accusing, just aware. "I'm here now," I replied, and kissed the top of his head, then Lily's. I barely slept, but I didn't need rest. I needed resolve. Sunday arrived with the kind of brittle autumn sunshine that made everything look too clean, too posed, perfect for a performance. The Vale family estate sat like it always had, confident, untouched, and too quiet for its size. The stained glass windows cast soft reds and blues on the polished wood floors as I walked into the dining room. My heels echoed more than they should have. The room smelled of lemon oil and aged memories. My mother used to bake cinnamon rolls in that kitchen. Now, this place felt more like a set waiting for a trial. Seraphine was already seated at the head of the table, sipping from a tall-stemmed glass like she was queen of something unspoken. She didn't rise. Her smile was soft, cold. "Rowena," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You look tired. I worry you're letting grief twist reality again." I slid into the chair across from her, folded my hands neatly, and returned the smile. "I am tired," I said. "Tired of being lied to." Delphine entered a moment later, smoothed his blazer, and nodded at me politely. "No need for hostility, Mrs. Vale. Misunderstandings, they can tear families apart." I reached into my bag and laid the documents on the table with calm precision. The forged signature on the insurance policy, the bank transfers labeled family maintenance, and the photo from the cabin, Silas and Seraphine, taken a year after his supposed death. "You didn't just forge his signature," I said evenly. "You forged his life, and then his death." Seraphine's expression didn't shift, not even a twitch. "If you say that again publicly," she replied, voice even silkier, "I'll sue you for defamation. You have no proof these aren't manipulated. AI is clever these days. Deepfakes are convincing. You think you're some kind of investigator, but all you're doing is embarrassing yourself." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was a blade, dipped in ice. For a moment, the room was silent, until Tom, who'd been sitting with Lily at the far end, suddenly spoke. "Mom's not lying." All eyes turned to him. "Aunt Sarah took us to the cabin," he said. "I saw the man there." Seraphine's hand jerked slightly, her wine glass landing with a soft clink as she set it down. Delphine cleared his throat. "Children misremember. It's common, especially under stress." "No," Tom said. He waved at us, and Aunt Sarah told me not to tell Mom. That did it. The shift in the room wasn't loud. It was felt, like pressure breaking behind your eyes. Seraphine rose, voice trembling ever so slightly, but still sharp. "You've always been jealous, Rowena," she spat. "Silas pitied you. You clung to him like a parasite because you couldn't stand being alone." I stood too. My voice didn't rise. "And you couldn't stand not being him." Dead silence. I reached into my purse again, slowly this time, deliberately. From inside, I pulled out the audio recorder. "I've been recording," I said. "Every word, including your threats. This room is full of witnesses." Seraphine's face froze. Delphine's eyes went wide. "You're bluffing," he said. "Then call the police," I said calmly. "Let's see whose fingerprints are on the documents. Let's see what a forensic analyst says about the voice on this recorder." Silence settled over the table like dust, heavy, undeniable. Seraphine's gaze sharpened into something jagged. "You think this ends with a tape?" she whispered. "You don't know what he did to protect you." My jaw clenched. "Maybe not, but I know what you did to bury him." I turned and walked out, my children following close. I didn't look back, but I heard it, the delicate ping of crystal meeting hardwood. A wine glass shattered. The sound of glass breaking trailed behind me like a threat disguised as fragility. But I didn't turn around, not when the truth had already shattered harder than crystal on wood. The twins stayed close as we walked to the car, their small fingers gripping mine like they didn't want to let go of something safe in a world that suddenly wasn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes open to the ceiling, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Retaliation? Regret? Maybe both. Around midnight, I finally drifted off in my chair, still fully dressed, the file folder marked Truth tucked beside me on the floor. The fire alarm screamed me awake. I shot up coughing, the air thick and bitter. Smoke curled under the door, and the hallway flickered orange. Flames danced like greedy fingers up the wall, heading straight toward my study, toward the only copies I hadn't digitized. I shouted the kids' names. Tom met me in the hallway, dragging Lily by the arm. I threw the back door open, pushed them outside barefoot, and ran back, just far enough to see the flames swallow the file cabinet. When the firefighters arrived, the fire was nearly out, but the damage was done. The study was gone. All of it, photos, paperwork, everything I hadn't already memorized. A firefighter knelt beside me as I sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket. "Did you have anything important in there, ma'am?" I looked at him through watery eyes. "Only the truth." By dawn, smoke still lingered in the walls. Tom and Lily were asleep on the pull-out couch in the den, exhausted. I stood at the edge of the study, staring into the blackened remains when a car pulled into the driveway. Detective May Larkin stepped out, notepad in hand, dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She glanced over the property, then at me. "I heard about the fire," she said. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" We sat on the back steps, cool air pressing down like a weight. "Any idea who might want to harm you?" she asked. I hesitated. Saying it aloud felt like admitting something irreversible. "My sister," I said finally. "She's been trying to bury something for 7 years." Larkin didn't flinch. She just noted it down, voice steady. "That's a serious accusation." So was faking a death. We sat in silence for a moment. Her pen stilled. "I'm listening," she said. That night, after everyone had left and the quiet settled in too hard, I found Tom crouched near the ruins of the study. He held something in his soot-streaked hand. "I found this," he said, opening his palm. A silver locket, burned on one side but still intact. Inside, a photo of Silas and me, taken the summer before we married. My breath caught. "He wouldn't want you to stop, Mom," Tom said quietly. "He'd want you to keep going." I knelt, took the locket, and held it to my chest. "I'm not stopping." The next morning, I drove with Detective Larkin to the ASA Hospital Records Office. We didn't speak much during the ride. She was focused. I was bracing. Inside, the records clerk scanned her screen, brow furrowed. "I don't have a death certificate for Silas Vale in our system," she said. "It was marked private release." "By whom?" Larkin asked. The clerk checked again. "Seraphine Vale. She submitted the request under power of attorney." Larkin turned to me, voice low. "Is that legal?" The clerk shrugged. "It's rare, but not impossible." I reached into my bag and slid across the copied signatures. "This isn't his handwriting. I can prove it." Larkin stared at the documents, her fingers resting lightly on the edge. "Then don't give this to her yet," she said. "Let her think she's safe. Let her keep walking straight into the trap." And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel alone in the fight. Back home, the air was still heavy with smoke. The twins stayed at my sister-in-law's house for the night, giving me space to think. In the charred corner where the study used to be, I lit a single candle and placed the locket beside it. "You burned my past, Sarah," I whispered, "but you just cleared the path to your fall." I sat in the dark, the flame flickering like a heartbeat I refused to let go of. I let the candle burn out beside me, the wax cooling slow as breath. Morning came, then vanished behind the blur of errands, emails, and one long, quiet drive into the city. I didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. By the time I stood at the museum steps that evening, the wind had picked up, brushing the silk of my dress against my legs. Black, simple, strong. Chosen not for beauty, but for clarity. I used to paint in this building. My brushstrokes once filled canvases that hung here, soft edges and warm light. But tonight, I'd come to erase a lie from the walls of memory. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble, and the kind of expensive silence that comes from people with too much money and too many secrets. Seraphine stood at the podium, center stage. Her gown sparkled silver, her smile perfectly pitched. "Thank you all for being here," she purred, voice carrying through the museum's high arches. We gather to honor a man whose generosity echoes through time. Silas Vale. Applause. Shallow. Polite. I stood in the back, letting her words wash over me like cold rain. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't flutter. What I felt was colder than fear, more exact than anger. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for truth. When the art auction ended, Seraphine gestured toward the stage. "And now," she said, voice like velvet over steel, "a few words from my dear sister, Rowena." Polite claps followed. She expected a tame speech, some teary sentiment about grief, resilience, maybe a donation pledge. I took the steps slowly, heels echoing on the floor, and stopped at the microphone. I looked at her, her painted face, her perfect poise, and spoke softly into the mic. 7 years ago, I buried my husband, or at least I believed I did. The crowd shifted, a few murmurs. Seraphine blinked once, smile frozen. "Tonight isn't about charity," I said. "It's about clarity and legacy, but not the kind you find in gilded speeches. The kind that's buried in ash and lies." I turned slightly and pressed a button on the small remote in my hand. Behind me, on the museum screen, a photo appeared, faded but unmistakable. Silas, alive, in the cabin, standing beside Seraphine, dated 1 year after his so-called death. Gasps swept the room like wind through dry grass. "That's fake," Seraphine blurted, voice louder than she intended. "You photoshopped that." I tilted my head. Funny thing about truth, it doesn't need filters. For a moment, no one moved. Then, from the third row, someone stood. Detective May Larkin, dressed in deep navy, her badge tucked just inside her blazer. "Seraphine Vale," she announced, her tone sharp and even. "You are under investigation for insurance fraud and falsifying legal documents." The crowd broke into murmurs. A few people turned. Delphine Cross began easing toward the exit, silent as mist. But 2 plainclothes officers stepped in his path. Seraphine's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, then shut. "She told me silence was peace," I said to the room, "but silence only serves the liar." Applause came slow, scattered, then built, whispers folding into claps, claps swelling into cheers, cameras clicked, people leaned in. Backstage, away from the chaos, Larkin handed me a plain envelope. "We found this in Cross's briefcase," she said. "It's addressed to you." I opened it. Inside, a short letter in Silas's handwriting. "If you find this, it means she couldn't control the story anymore. I'm sorry I let her twist mine. Forgive me, Ro." I read it 3 times before the tears came. They didn't fall in sobs, just quiet, steady. "I already did," I whispered. Outside, the museum lights glowed like distant stars. The night air felt honest, finally. I stood at the fountain in the courtyard, opened my hand, and looked at Silas's ring. "Rest now," I said softly, tossing it into the water. It landed with a small plunk, barely more than a whisper. Ripples spread outward. My reflection in the water wavered for a moment, then stilled. The ripples faded. I stood there a while longer, watching my own reflections settle back into stillness. The night was soft and quiet, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. That ring belonged to the past, and I had just handed it back. A month passed, like pages turning. No drama, no loud revelations. Just healing. The kind that doesn't announce itself but weaves through morning routines and the sound of a child's laughter down the hall. I'd started painting again. The rebuilt study still smelled faintly of drywall and new wood. There was sunlight on the floor most mornings now, unfiltered, warm, honest. The canvas beside my desk showed the lake, unfinished, but already brighter than I remembered it. Then one morning, while I was rinsing out a brush, the mail slot clicked. A single envelope slid across the hardwood. No return address. Just my name, in a handwriting I hadn't seen since before the lies began. Silas. I dried my hands slowly, sat at the edge of the couch, and opened it. Ro. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. Or maybe I did, and this is just my way of saying goodbye the right way. I signed everything to protect you. Seraphine told me if I didn't, you'd lose the house, the business, everything we built. I didn't see it then. What she really wanted was control. I should have come home. I'm sorry. A photo slipped out, us, standing by the lake, arms tangled like teenagers. I hadn't seen that one before. His smile wasn't polished. Mine wasn't forced. I pressed it to my chest and closed my eyes. I forgive you, I whispered. We both lost pieces of ourselves trying to survive her. Later that day, I sat in the rebuilt kitchen with Detective Larkin. She looked tired but kind, a woman who'd seen enough endings to recognize new beginnings. They recovered the original tapes, she said, handing me a folder. Your husband's voice, his handwriting, the court's moving to clear his name officially. I nodded. Justice doesn't undo grief, but it quiets the ache. Before she left, she said, he didn't die for nothing, Rowena. That night, after the kids were asleep, I found an old answering machine buried in a half-melted box we'd saved from the fire. I plugged it in, half expecting it to be blank. A click, then static, then his voice. Ro, if she ever tells you I'm gone, don't believe her. There was a pause, just long enough to imagine him breathing, and then a quiet laugh I hadn't heard in years. Not a recording, a memory. The next morning, I drove out to the lake one last time. The sun was just starting to rise, the sky painted in peach and lavender. I walked up the porch steps of the cabin. It smelled like thyme and pine needles. On the bench, a small metal box. Property of SV. Inside, a brass key, polished and clean. I used it on the drawer beneath the bed. It clicked open. One envelope, no address, no date. Just my name. You found me. Now, find yourself. That was it. I stood there for a long time, holding that envelope like it weighed more than any secret ever had. Back home, I knew what had to happen. I took down the old photos from the study walls, not to erase history, but to make space for the life I was choosing now. I framed one picture, me and the twins, barefoot by the lake, laughing at something I can't even remember now. That photo went above my desk. Below it, I wrote, "Peace isn't the absence of lies, it's the choice to stop living inside them." Then, for the first time in years, I wrote a letter of my own. Seraphine, you can keep the wealth. You can keep the lies. I'll keep the peace. Rowena. I sealed it, left it on the mantel, and didn't look back. Outside, the street was just starting to wake. A jogger passed by with earbuds in, waving good morning. The air smelled like cut grass and autumn. I walked toward the car, no particular destination in mind, but I stopped once more by the lake before heading out. The surface was still, reflecting a sky that had no idea what we'd been through. My reflection looked back at me, steady, whole. He may have died twice, once in flesh, once in truth, I murmured, but I lived again, both times. The wind stirred the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a phone buzzed, Silas's old ringtone, just once, then silence.